The sun beat down relentlessly on the vast expanse of the African desert. Kofi, a 17-year-old Ghanaian boy, trudged through the scorching sand, his feet sinking with each weary step. His dark skin glistened with sweat, and his bright eyes scanned the horizon for any sign of refuge. Kofi's thoughts drifted back to his village, left behind in search of a better life. His family's struggles and his own desire for adventure drove him to explore the unknown. With a worn backpack slung over his shoulder, he carried the weight of his dreams and the fear of the unknown. As he walked, the silence was broken by the rustling of leaves and snapping of twigs. Kofi's heart quickened, sensing something was amiss. Suddenly, a thunderous roar shook the ground beneath his feet. "A lion!" Kofi's mind screamed. Fear gripped his chest, and adrenaline coursed through his veins. He knew he had to run, but where? The endless dunes stretched out before him like an ocean of gold. Kofi's mind flashed back to stories of his grandfather, Akwasi, a revered hunter in their village. Akwasi's eyes would sparkle as he recounted tales of tracking prey and outsmarting predators. One particular story stood out in Kofi's memory. "Akwasi, what if I'm faced with a lion?" young Kofi had asked, wide-eyed. Akwasi's expression turned serious. "Stay calm, listen, and trust your instincts. A lion's roar can shake the earth, but it's the silence that precedes it that holds the truth. Pay attention to the wind, the trees, and the creatures around you. They'll warn you before the lion strikes." Kofi recalled the way Akwasi demonstrated how to track, using his fingers to mimic the lion's paw prints in the sand. "A lion's strength lies in its patience," Akwasi said. "Yours lies in your wit and quick thinking." Taking a deep breath, Kofi focused on his surroundings. He noticed the acacia trees standing sentinel, their thorns like nature's own defense. The wind carried the sweet scent of desert lavender, and the scorching sun beat down upon Kofi's back, relentless in its ferocity. The desert stretched out before him like an endless sea, dunes rolling into the horizon. The air shimmered with heat haze, making mirages dance on the sand. Days ago, Kofi had left his village in Ghana, driven by a desire to explore the world beyond. His family's struggles and his own sense of adventure propelled him forward. With a worn backpack and a heart full of hope, he set out for Egypt, seeking new opportunities. A series of misfortunes had led Kofi astray. A wrong turn, a misleading map, and a treacherous river crossing had deposited him in this unforgiving landscape. Now, with dwindling supplies and no clear direction, Kofi faced the harsh reality of his decisions. To his left, rocky outcroppings jutted from the earth, ancient sentinels guarding secrets of the desert. The wind whispered through their crevices, its soft sighs a stark contrast to the lion's thunderous roar. Kofi's gaze swept across the landscape, searching for shelter or respite. The acacia trees, with their twisted branches and thorns, offered meager shade. Sparse grasses and succulents clung to life, defying the unforgiving environment. As he walked, sand slid beneath his feet, treacherous and unforgiving. Kofi's eyes adjusted to the glare, spotting subtle signs of life: a lizard's scurrying path, a vulture's soaring silhouette, and the skeletal remains of a long-forgotten tree. The desert's vastness swallowed Kofi whole, leaving him feeling tiny and vulnerable. Yet with each step, his determination grew. He would survive this unforgiving landscape and outsmart the lion. As Kofi trudged through the sand, his thoughts consumed by the vast expanse of the desert, a sudden movement caught his attention. A tawny shape emerged from the rocky outcroppings, its eyes fixed intently on Kofi. Time froze. The lion's gaze seemed to burn with an inner fire, its intensity paralyzing Kofi. For an eternal moment, they locked eyes, the only sound the soft rustling of sand beneath the lion's paws. Then, in a flash of golden fur, the lion sprang into motion. Kofi's heart catapulted into a frantic rhythm as he turned to flee. Sand swirled around his feet, treacherous and unforgiving. "Run!" his mind screamed. Kofi's legs pumped furiously, but the lion's roar grew louder, closer. He dared not look back, fearing what he might see. The wind whipped his face, carrying the lion's hot breath. Panic threatened to overwhelm Kofi, but Akwasi's words echoed in his mind. "Stay calm, listen, and trust your instincts." He forced himself to focus on the terrain ahead. A narrow ravine sliced through the rocky outcroppings, a potential refuge. Kofi veered sharply toward the gap, praying the lion wouldn't follow. The ravine's walls blurred past him, a kaleidoscope of rock and sand. Suddenly, the lion's roar ceased. Kofi's heart skipped a beat. Had he lost the lion? He slowed, listening intently. The silence was more terrifying than the roar. As he stood frozen, the desert stillness enveloped him like a shroud. Kofi's senses strained to detect any sign of the lion. The wind stilled, the sand seemed to hold its breath, and the rocks loomed like sentinels. And then, a faint rustling echoed through the ravine. Kofi's heart plunged into his stomach. Was it the lion, or something far more sinister? Kofi's heart racing, he spun around, scanning the ravine for any sign of the lion. The rustling grew louder, sending his senses into overdrive. With a burst of adrenaline, he sprinted forward, desperate to escape. His feet pounded the sand, sending rocks and pebbles scattering. The ravine's walls seemed to close in around him, amplifying his panic. Kofi's breath came in ragged gasps, his lungs burning. Suddenly, the ravine opened up into a vast expanse of sand, stretching out like an endless sea. Kofi's momentum carried him forward, but his legs faltered as he realized the lion could easily outrun him in this open terrain. "Think, Kofi, think." Akwasi's words echoed in his mind. "Use your surroundings to your advantage." Kofi frantically scanned the horizon, searching for any feature to aid his escape. A cluster of acacia trees stood sentinel in the distance, their thorns a potential barrier against the lion. Kofi veered sharply toward the trees, praying the lion wouldn't follow. As he approached the trees, Kofi spotted a narrow crevice between two massive trunks. Without hesitation, he squeezed through the gap, his heart racing. For a moment he paused, listening. The lion's roar echoed through the ravine, growing fainter. Kofi's breath slowed, hope rising. Maybe he'd lost the lion. But as he turned to continue his escape, a low growl vibrated through the air, sending shivers down Kofi's spine. The lion had followed. Kofi's eyes adjusted to the dim light within the tree cluster, revealing a labyrinth of twisted branches and thorns. He navigated the maze, desperate to shake the lion. Would the trees provide enough cover, or would the lion's fury tear him from his hiding place? The blistering sun beat down on Kofi like a relentless drum, relentless in its ferocity. The desert stretched out before him, an endless expanse of sand and rock that seemed to swallow all hope. He trudged forward, each step a battle against the scorching heat and unforgiving terrain. Kofi's canteen was almost empty, and he rationed every drop of water carefully. The dry air sucked moisture from his skin, leaving him feeling parched and brittle. His feet ached within his worn boots, blistered and sore from days of walking. As he climbed a dune, the wind whipped sand into his face, stinging his eyes. Kofi squinted, shielding his face with a cloth. The storm brewed on the horizon, its darkness threatening to engulf him. Suddenly, a sandstorm erupted, reducing visibility to near zero. Kofi huddled behind a rocky outcropping, waiting for the tempest to pass. The howling wind and stinging sand made every moment feel like an eternity. When the storm finally subsided, Kofi emerged, blinking in the bright sunlight. His compass was lost, and the landscape had shifted, disorienting him. Panic crept in, threatening to overwhelm him. When would he find refuge? Would he ever escape this desolate landscape? As Kofi pressed on, the sun began its slow descent into the horizon. He spotted a cluster of rocks in the distance, potentially offering shelter for the night. Exhausted, Kofi stumbled toward the rocks, his body screaming for rest. As night fell, he huddled in the shadows, listening to the desert's eerie silence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Would Kofi find the strength to face them? Kofi's restless night was filled with dark visions of dehydration and sand wraiths. Dawn broke, casting a golden glow over the desert. He emerged from his rocky shelter, stretching stiff limbs. As he walked, Kofi spotted a figure in the distance, a woman with a scarf-wrapped head and worn robes. She approached, her eyes locked onto his. "Lost?" she asked, her voice low and smooth. Kofi hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I'm trying to reach the next oasis," he admitted. The woman nodded. "I'm Amira. I know this desert like my own heart." Kofi's eyes widened. Enid, will you help me? Amira smiled. I'll teach you how to survive. Together they traversed the desert's treacherous terrain. Amira showed Kofi which plants provided water, how to navigate by the stars, and how to avoid deadly creatures. As the sun climbed higher, Amira led Kofi to a hidden spring. Drink deeply, she advised. Kofi gulped the cool water, feeling life return to his parched body. Thank you, he said, gratitude swelling in his chest. Amira's gaze softened. In the desert, we help each other. It's the only way to survive. As they rested, Kofi asked Amira about her past. I grew up in a village on the desert's edge, she replied. My family were nomads. I learned to navigate, to find water and shelter. Kofi listened intently. What brought you out here alone? He asked. Amira's expression turned somber. I'm searching for something, she said. Something lost long ago. Kofi sensed a deep pain within Amira. What is it? He pressed. Amira's gaze drifted into the distance. Something precious, she whispered. Something I'll find, no matter the cost. Kofi's determination grew. I'll help you, he vowed. Amira's eyes snapped back to his. You don't understand what you're offering, she warned. Kofi stood firm. I'll help you, Amira. Together, we'll face whatever dangers lie ahead. Amira's smile returned. Then let's begin. As Kofi and Amira ventured deeper into the desert, the sun beat down relentlessly. They navigated through a maze of dunes, sand swirling around their feet. Watch for snakes, Amira warned, her eyes scanning the ground. They hide in shadows. Kofi nodded, his heart racing at the thought of venomous fangs. Suddenly, Amira stopped, her gaze fixed on a nearby rock. Sand viper, she whispered. Kofi's eyes widened as a serpent slithered out from beneath the rock. Amira grasped his arm, pulling him back. Don't move, she breathed. The viper raised its head, forked tongue darting in and out. Kofi froze, fear coursing through his veins. Amira slowly reached for her dagger. If it strikes, run, she whispered. But instead of attacking, the viper began to sway, its body mesmerized by Amira's gentle humming. The sound was hypnotic, calming the creature. As the viper retreated, Kofi exhaled sharply. How did you do that? He asked. Amira smiled. Desert magic. They continued on, encountering more creatures, horned lizards, jackals, and even a majestic falcon soaring overhead. As night fell, they settled around a small fire, watching stars twinkle to life. Desert nights are beautiful, Amira said, her voice filled with wonder. Kofi nodded, feeling a deep connection to this unforgiving landscape. Tell me more about your past, he asked. Amira's gaze drifted into the flames. I lost someone dear, she said. A brother. He was taken by the sand wraiths. Kofi's heart went out to her. I'm sorry, he said. Amira's eyes locked onto his. I'll find him, she vowed, no matter what dangers lie ahead. Kofi's determination grew. We'll face them together. As they settled into an uneasy sleep, the desert night hid secrets and dangers, waiting to strike. Days blurred together as Kofi and Amira traversed the unforgiving desert. Water scarcity and blistering heat took their toll. Kofi's body ached, his mind foggy from dehydration. Amira's expression turned grim. We must find shelter soon, she said. Kofi nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. But the desert stretched out, endless and merciless. As night fell, they huddled together, sharing what little water remained. I'm sorry, Kofi whispered. Amira's gaze softened. This isn't your fault, she replied. But Kofi felt responsible. What if they didn't find refuge? What if the sand wraiths found them? Fear clawed at his mind, threatening to consume him. Amira sensed his distress. Kofi, we'll get through this, she said. But her words offered little comfort. The stars above seemed distant, uncaring. As they rested, Kofi's dreams were haunted by visions of sand wraiths and endless dunes. He awoke to Amira's gentle shaking. Kofi, wake up, she whispered. His eyes snapped open. What was wrong? Amira's face was pale. I saw something, she whispered. Kofi's heart sank. What? Amira's voice trembled. A sand wraith. Kofi's fear spiked. Where? Amira pointed into the darkness. It's coming for us. Kofi and Amira climbed another dune, the scorching sun beating down relentlessly. Amira's canteen was almost empty, and Kofi's worries grew. As they crested the dune, a majestic lion emerged from the horizon. Zephyr, the lion, approached them with regal confidence, his piercing gaze commanding respect. Amira stood frozen, her hand on the dagger at her waist. Kofi, sensing no malice, took a step forward. "Who are you?" Kofi asked, his voice firm but cautious. Zephyr's deep voice replied, "I am Zephyr, king of the savannah. I seek those who desecrate our lands." His eyes narrowed, scrutinizing Kofi and Amira. Kofi explained their quest for refuge, leaving out the more perilous details. Zephyr listened intently, his tail twitching. "You're not with them," Zephyr stated, his tone softer. "The poachers who ravage our lands." Amira shook her head vigorously. "No, we're fleeing." Zephyr's gaze lingered on Amira before returning to Kofi. "I'll aid you. My knowledge of the desert will guide us to safety." Kofi hesitated, unsure about trusting a stranger, even one as majestic as Zephyr. But Amira's desperate eyes met his, and he nodded. As they ventured onward, Zephyr shared tales of his kingdom and the struggles against poachers. His deep voice rumbled with emotion, painting vivid images in Kofi's mind. "The savannah was once thriving," Zephyr said, his eyes clouding. "Now our numbers dwindle. The poachers must be stopped." Kofi sensed Zephyr's pain and determination. This lion was more than a majestic creature. He was a leader fighting for his people. The sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow across the desert. Zephyr led them to a hidden oasis, a haven amidst the unforgiving dunes. As they rested, Kofi realized that Zephyr's aid came with a price, joining the fight against the poachers. As night fell, the oasis transformed into a tranquil sanctuary. Stars twinkled above, and the sound of crickets lulled Kofi into a restless sleep. Amira sat watch, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. Suddenly, a chilling scream pierced the air, shattering the peaceful atmosphere. "The wraiths have returned," Amira whispered, her voice trembling. Zephyr's ears perked up, his eyes scanning the horizon. He growled, his deep voice rumbling. "We must find shelter," Kofi urged, grabbing his dagger. The sand wraiths emerged, their ethereal forms billowing like dark clouds. They seemed to materialize from the sand itself, their misty tendrils snaking toward Kofi, Amira, and Zephyr. Zephyr positioned himself between the wraiths and his new allies. "I'll protect you," he growled, his claws flashing in the moonlight. The wraiths descended, their spectral forms swirling around Zephyr. He swiped at them, his claws slicing through their misty bodies. Kofi and Amira joined the battle, their daggers slicing through the wraiths' ethereal forms. But for every wraith they defeated, two more emerged. As the fight raged on, Kofi realized Zephyr's strength and agility made him a valuable ally. The lion's claws tore through the wraiths, sending them dissipating into the night air. But the wraiths seemed endless, their numbers swelling like the sand dunes. Kofi's day. Gear sliced through the air, striking true time and again, but the wraiths kept coming. Amira stumbled, her dagger slipping from her grasp. Zephyr caught her, holding her close as he swiped at the encroaching wraiths. "Get behind me," Zephyr roared, shielding Amira and Kofi from the wraiths. Kofi nodded, grabbing Amira's arm and pulling her close. Together, they fought alongside Zephyr, their movements fluid and desperate. The battle raged on, the outcome uncertain. The sand wraiths closed in, their misty forms thickening into a suffocating shroud. Zephyr's claws tore through the darkness, but the wraiths seemed to absorb the blows. "We can't hold out much longer," Amira warned, her voice strained. "There are too many." Kofi nodded, his dagger slicing through the air with dwindling precision. "We need a plan, or we'll be overwhelmed." Zephyr's eyes locked onto Kofi's, a spark of understanding flashing between them. "Follow me," Zephyr roared, charging forward. Kofi and Amira sprinted after Zephyr, the wraiths swirling around them like a vortex. The lion led them to a nearby dune, its peak cresting like a wave. "Up!" Zephyr shouted, boosting Kofi and Amira onto the dune's peak. The wraiths surged below, their ethereal forms crashing against the dune's base. "We'll hold here," Zephyr declared, his claws digging into the sand. Kofi and Amira stood shoulder to shoulder with Zephyr, their daggers at the ready. As the wraiths launched a final assault, Zephyr unleashed a mighty roar, his voice echoing across the desert. "Fight with me," he thundered. Kofi and Amira rallied, their daggers flashing in the moonlight. The battle raged on, the three defenders holding their ground against the relentless wraiths. But the sand wraiths seemed endless, their numbers unyielding. As the fight wore on, Kofi's arm ached, his dagger trembling with fatigue. Amira stumbled, her foot slipping on the sand. Zephyr caught her, holding her close as he swiped at the encroaching wraiths. "Hold on," Zephyr urged. Kofi gritted his teeth, his dagger slicing through the air with renewed determination. They couldn't give up now. As dawn broke, the sand wraiths dissipated, their misty forms vanishing into the rising sun. Exhausted, Kofi, Amira, and Zephyr stumbled upon an ancient temple hidden amidst the dunes. "We'll rest here," Zephyr decreed, his voice firm. The temple's entrance, guarded by twin stone lions, beckoned them. As they ventured deeper, intricate hieroglyphics adorned the walls. Amira's eyes widened. "This is an ancient language," Kofi's curiosity piqued. "What does it say?" Amira translated, her voice filled with awe. "It speaks of an ancient civilization, one that harnessed the desert's power." Zephyr's ears perked up. "The power of the desert?" Amira nodded. "Legend says they could control the sands." Kofi's eyes sparkled. "That's exactly what we need." Deeper within the temple, a hidden chamber revealed ancient artifacts. A glowing crystal, nestled within a golden pedestal, caught Kofi's attention. Zephyr approached the pedestal, his whiskers twitching. "This crystal," Zephyr said, "holds the key." Amira examined the crystal. "It's imbued with ancient magic." Kofi's determination grew. "We can use this." With the crystal's power, their chances of defeating the sand wraiths increased. With the crystal's power, their chances of defeating the sand wraiths increased. Kofi carefully extracted the crystal from the pedestal, feeling its energy coursing through him. "This is it," Amira whispered, her eyes shining. "This crystal holds the key to our survival." Zephyr nodded, his whiskers twitching. "We'll use its power to drive the wraiths back." As they held the crystal, the temple's energy resonated with theirs. The air vibrated with anticipation. Suddenly, the temple's walls began to glow. Soft, golden light enveloped them, soothing their weary bodies. "Rest now," Zephyr urged. "We'll leave at dusk." Amira collapsed onto the cool floor, her eyes closing. Kofi joined her, his fatigue-worn body grateful. Zephyr stood watch, his eyes scanning the horizon. As the sun climbed higher, the temple's shadows retreated. The golden light intensified, rejuvenating their spirits. Kofi's thoughts turned to their predicament. "We can't stay here forever," he said. Amira opened her eyes. "I know," Zephyr nodded. "We'll leave at dusk, prepared to face whatever lies ahead." Their brief respite would soon end. As they rested, Kofi's mind wandered. He envisioned his family, his friends, their faces blurred, replaced by the sand wraiths. Kofi's determination hardened. He would protect Amira. He would defeat the sand wraiths. The temple's tranquility enveloped them, a welcome respite from the relentless chase. As Kofi rested, his mind wandered to his past. Memories of his family, his friends, and his life before the sand wraiths flooded his thoughts. He recalled laughter-filled days, warm nights spent under the stars, and the sense of belonging that came with being part of a community. But those memories were now tainted by the pain of loss. The sand wraiths had taken everything, leaving Kofi with only his determination to survive. Amira's gentle voice interrupted his reverie. "Kofi, what drives you?" Kofi opened his eyes, meeting Amira's curious gaze. "My family, my friends. I won't let the wraiths take everything." His voice cracked, emotions welling up. Amira nodded, understanding etched on her face. "I understand. I lost someone too." Her eyes clouded, and for a moment, Kofi saw the depth of her pain. Zephyr's ears perked up, his interest piqued. "Who?" he asked softly. Amira's voice barely above a whisper. "My brother. He was taken by the wraiths." Tears glistened in her eyes, but she blinked them away. Kofi's expression softened. "I'm sorry," he said, genuine empathy in his voice. Zephyr's voice rumbled, a low growl. "We'll avenge your brother. We'll defeat the wraiths." His eyes burned with determination. Their shared determination strengthened their bond. In that moment, Kofi realized that their alliance was more than just a means to survive. It was a connection forged in the fire of shared loss. As they sat in silence, the temple's tranquility enveloped them. The golden light seemed to intensify, warming their hearts. Amira broke the silence. "We need to understand the crystal's power." She held up the crystal, its facets glinting. Zephyr nodded. "The ancient civilization that created this temple must have left clues." Kofi stood, his mind racing. "Let's search the temple. We might find something." Together they scoured the temple, uncovering intricate hieroglyphics and ancient texts. The more they discovered, the more they realized the crystal's significance. "This crystal," Amira said, eyes shining, "is the key to harnessing the desert's energy." Zephyr's ears perked up. "We can use it to drive the wraiths back." Kofi's determination hardened. "We'll protect our people. We'll reclaim our land." Their shared resolve forged a sense of purpose. They knew the road ahead would be treacherous, but together they were unstoppable. With their newfound understanding of the crystal's power, Kofi, Amira, and Zephyr devised a plan to harness its energy and create a barrier to protect their people. "We'll need to channel the crystal's energy carefully," Amira explained, "to ensure the barrier is strong enough to repel the wraiths." Zephyr nodded, his whiskers twitching. "I'll provide the lion's share of the energy. My connection to the desert will amplify the crystal's power." Kofi's determination hardened. "I'll focus on shaping the barrier. We need to protect our people." Their shared resolve forged a sense of purpose. Together, they prepared for the challenge ahead. As dusk approached, they stood ready, surrounded by the temple's ancient artifacts. "The temple's energy will amplify the crystal's power," Amira said, her eyes shining with anticipation. Zephyr's ears perked up. "Let's begin." Kofi held the crystal aloft, its facets glinting in the fading light. The temple's energy surged, resonating with the crystal's power. Amira began to chant, her voice weaving a mystical pattern. Zephyr's roar echoed through the temple, his energy merging with the crystal's. Kofi focused on shaping the barrier, envisioning a protective shield around their people. The air vibrated with tension as the crystal's power grew. Suddenly, a blinding light filled the temple. As they ventured deeper into the desert, the landscape grew treacherous. Sandstorms brewed on the horizon, their fury intensifying. The barrier they had created to protect their people was holding, but they knew the wraiths would regroup soon. "The barrier will protect our people," Amira said, her voice carried away by the wind. "But we must reach the ancient city before the wraiths regroup." Zephyr nodded, his ears flapping in the rising wind. "We'll need to navigate through the storm." Kofi squinted, eyes scanning the horizon. "I see a gap between the dunes. We can take shelter there." The storm raged on, its fury unrelenting. Sand swirled, reducing visibility. Their progress slowed. "We need to keep moving," Amira urged. "The wraiths won't give us much time." Zephyr's roar echoed through the storm. "Follow me." He led the way, his knowledge of the desert guiding them through the treacherous terrain. Suddenly, a massive sandworm burst from the ground. "Take cover!" Zephyr roared. They scrambled to safety, hearts racing. The worm vanished into the storm. "That was close," Kofi breathed. Amira nodded. "We can't afford mistakes." Their determination hardened. As they navigated the treacherous terrain, Kofi's survival skills were put to the test. The storm raged on, sand swirling around them, reducing visibility. "We need shelter," Amira shouted above the wind. Kofi spotted a cave in the distance, partially hidden by the swirling sand. "There," Zephyr led the way, his eyes fixed on the cave. Inside, they collapsed, exhausted, grateful for the respite. Amira examined the crystal, its facets glinting in the dim light. "The crystal's power is waning." Kofi frowned. "We need to recharge it." Zephyr nodded. "I know a place." Their rest was short-lived. A faint rumble echoed through the cave. "Wraiths?" Kofi whispered. Zephyr's ears perked up. "No, something else." Suddenly, the cave shook violently. "What's happening?" Amira cried. Kofi grabbed the crystal, its power surging. "The crystal's reacting." The cave's walls began to tremble. "We need to get out," Zephyr roared. They sprinted through the cave. But as they turned a corner, they stumbled upon an ancient chamber. "Look," Amira breathed. Ancient artifacts lined the walls. A glowing artifact caught Kofi's eye. "The crystal of life," Zephyr whispered. "Legend says it can recharge our crystal." Kofi's determination hardened. "We need that crystal." But as they reached for it, the chamber began to seal itself. We're trapped, Amira cried. The chamber sealed itself, trapping them. We need to find a way out, Kofi urged. Amira examined the walls. There's a hidden door. Zephyr's ears perked up. I'll find it. As Zephyr searched, Kofi and Amira studied the artifacts. This symbol, Amira said, it's from an ancient language. Kofi's eyes widened. The language of the crystal. Suddenly, Zephyr roared, I found it! The hidden door swung open. Quickly, Zephyr shouted. They sprinted through the door. Outside, the storm raged on. The sea, crystal of life, Amira reminded. We need it. Kofi nodded. We'll find it. Their determination hardened. As they journeyed deeper into the desert, obstacles mounted. Sandworms burst from the ground. Wraiths swooped down. But Kofi, Amira, and Zephyr persevered. Their bond strengthened. Finally, after hours of trekking, they reached the crystal of life. Its glow illuminated the desert. Their crystal, now recharged, glowed brightly. The crystal of life, Amira whispered, holds a secret. Kofi's curiosity piqued. What secret? Amira's eyes sparkled. Legend says the crystal can heal the land. Zephyr's ears perked up. Restore the desert's fertility. Amira nodded. But there's more. The crystal can awaken an ancient power. Kofi's determination hardened. We must uncover its secrets. And so they began their quest to unlock the crystal of life's mysteries. As they stood there, the crystal's glow enveloping them, they knew their journey was far from over. But together, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they ventured deeper into the desert, their progress was halted by a massive sandstorm. We must take shelter, Amira shouted above the wind. Zephyr led the way, his eyes fixed on a nearby oasis. Inside, they collapsed, exhausted. But their rest was short-lived. A faint rumble echoed through the oasis. Wraiths? Kofi whispered. Zephyr's ears perked up. No, something else. Suddenly, the oasis shook violently. What's happening? Amira cried. Kofi grabbed the crystal, its power surging. The crystal's reacting. Amira's eyes widened. I think I know what's happening. Remember the ancient text we found? It warned against removing the crystal of life from its pedestal without performing the ritual of balance. Kofi's face fell. I didn't do the ritual. I just took the crystal. Zephyr's expression turned grave. You've awakened the guardian of the desert. The ground trembled as a massive sandworm burst from the ground. The guardian, Amira breathed. It's said to be unstoppable. Kofi's determination hardened. We must stop it. Their mistakes had put the entire desert at risk. As the guardian of the desert bore down on them, Kofi, Amira, and Zephyr prepared for the worst. The sandworm's massive body threatened to engulf them, its jaws open wide, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. But just as all hope seemed lost, a figure emerged from the sandstorm. Wait, the figure shouted, holding up a hand. The guardian halted, its gaze fixed on the newcomer. Kofi, Amira, and Zephyr exchanged stunned glances. Who are you? Kofi asked, still trying to process the sudden interruption. I am Aaron, the figure replied, a desert nomad. I've been tracking the guardian. Aaron's eyes locked onto the crystal, and her expression turned grave. You're the ones who awakened it, she stated. Amira nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. We didn't know. Aaron waved her hand, cutting off Amira's explanation. No time for explanations. We must stop the guardian together. Zephyr's ears perked up, his interest piqued. You know how to stop it, he asked. Aaron nodded. I know its weakness. My tribe has lived in these dunes for generations. We've learned to coexist with the guardian. Kofi's curiosity got the better of him. What's its weakness? He pressed. Aaron's smile hinted at secrets. That's for me to know, she teased. But I'll share it with you, if you trust me. Their unexpected ally had arrived, bearing secrets and mystery. As they stood there, the sandstorm raging around them, Kofi couldn't help but wonder about Aaron's motivations. Why would a desert nomad risk her life to help strangers? He looked at Amira and Zephyr, saw the hope in their eyes. They had no choice but to trust Aaron. Okay, Kofi said finally. We trust you. Aaron's smile widened. Then let's beg, in. With that, their unlikely alliance was formed. As they journeyed together, Kofi noticed the way Aaron moved with ease through the treacherous terrain. Your tribe, Kofi asked, curiosity getting the better of him. What's their secret? Aaron's eyes sparkled. "We've learned to live with the desert, not against it. We respect its power." Kofi's perspective shifted. He saw the desert as more than a treacherous terrain. It was a living, breathing entity. As they ventured deeper into the desert, Kofi noticed subtle changes in Aaron's demeanor. "Aaron, what drives you to protect the desert?" Kofi asked. Aaron's gaze drifted into the distance. "I lost my family to the Guardian's destruction," she said, her voice tinged with sorrow. Kofi's heart went out to her. "I'm sorry," he said. Aaron's eyes refocused. "That's why I've dedicated my life to understanding the Guardian's patterns," she explained. Amira nodded. "Your knowledge is invaluable," she said. Zephyr's ears perked up. "Can you teach us more?" he asked. Aaron smiled. "I'll share everything I know." Their unlikely friendship blossomed. As they traversed treacherous dunes, Aaron shared ancient stories. "The desert's secrets," she whispered, "lie within its ancient songs." Kofi listened intently. "The songs hold the key to restoring balance," Aaron said. Amira's eyes sparkled. "Let's learn the songs," she exclaimed. Zephyr grinned. "Together, we'll save the desert." Their determination hardened, but the Guardian's roar echoed through the dunes. "It's closing in," Aaron warned. Kofi's heart pounded. "We must hurry," he urged. Aaron led them to a hidden oasis. "Here the ancient songs are etched into the rocks," she said. Kofi marveled at the intricate carvings. "These symbols hold the secrets?" he asked. Aaron nodded. "The songs are a map to the Guardian's weakness," she explained. Amira's eyes widened. "Let's decipher the symbols," she exclaimed. Zephyr's ears perked up. "I recognize some patterns," he said. Together, they unraveled the ancient songs. Their harmony echoed through the oasis. "The songs are beautiful," Kofi breathed. Aaron smiled. "The desert's heartbeat," she said. Suddenly, the symbols illuminated. "The map reveals the Guardian's core," Amira exclaimed. Kofi's determination hardened. "We must reach the core," he vowed. But the Guardian's roar grew louder. "It's closing in," Zephyr warned. Aaron's eyes locked onto Kofi. "Are you ready?" she asked. Kofi nodded. Their final battle loomed. Aaron led them to the Guardian's core. "This is it," she whispered. "The heart of the desert." Kofi steeled himself. "We must destroy the core," he said. Amira nodded. "Together." Zephyr's ears folded back. "I'll take point." The Guardian's roar shook the ground. As they entered the core, flames engulfed them. "Use the ancient songs," Aaron shouted. Their harmony echoed through the core. Flames dissipated, revealing the crystal. "The crystal's power," Amira breathed. Kofi grasped the crystal. Energy surged through him. "The balance," he whispered. The Guardian's roar faded. The desert's heartbeat stabilized, their mission accomplished. But as they turned to leave, Aaron vanished. "Aaron!" Kofi shouted. Only silence replied. Had they lost their ally? Kofi's voice echoed through the desert. "Aaron!" he shouted, but only silence replied. Suddenly, a lion emerged from the shadows, its piercing gaze locked onto Kofi. "Aaron's gone," the lion growled. Kofi stood firm, his heart pounding. "Where is she?" he demanded. The lion's tail twitched. "You shouldn't have come here," it snarled. Amira stepped forward, her voice calm. "We mean no harm," she said. The lion's eyes narrowed. "You're the ones who awakened the Guardian," it accused. Zephyr's ears folded back. "We fixed the balance," he defended. The lion's gaze lingered on Kofi. "You have something that belongs to me," it said. Kofi's hand instinctively went to the crystal. "What do you want?" he asked. The lion's voice dropped to a whisper. "Meet me at the ancient temple at sunset." With that, the lion vanished. Kofi's mind reeled. "What just happened?" Amira asked. Zephyr's ears perked up. That lion's connected to Aaron, he realized. Kofi's determination hardened. "We'll find Aaron," he vowed. As they journeyed to the ancient temple, the sun dipped below the horizon. Their fate awaited. The temple loomed before them, its entrance guarded by 2 stone statues. Kofi's heart pounded. "What's inside?" Amira whispered. Zephyr's ears twitched. "Only one way to find out," he said. They stepped into the temple, darkness enveloping them. A faint glow illuminated the path ahead. "Follow the light," Kofi whispered. As they walked, the light grew brighter. A figure awaited them. The figure stepped forward, revealing a wise old man. "Welcome, Kofi," he said. I've been expecting you. Kofi's curiosity piqued. Who are you? He asked. The old man smiled. I am the guardian of the temple, he replied. And you, Kofi, are the chosen one. Amira's eyes widened. Chosen one, she repeated. The guardian nodded. Kofi's courage and determination have brought balance to the desert, he explained. Zephyr's ears perked up. What's next? He asked. The guardian's expression turned serious. The final test, he said. Are you ready, Kofi? Kofi steeled himself. I'm ready, he vowed. The guardian nodded. Then let us begin. With that, the temple began to shake. The ground trembled. The test has begun, the guardian shouted. Suddenly, the temple was filled with a blinding light. When the light faded, Kofi found himself standing alone in a vast desert. A maze. Find your way out, a voice whispered. Kofi looked around, seeing nothing but sand dunes. He took a deep breath. He would not give up. With determination, he began to walk. The maze shifted and changed. Kofi's path disappeared. He kept walking. Sandstorms erupted. Kofi covered his face. He stumbled forward. Suddenly, a figure appeared before him. Aaron. Kofi, she said. I'm proud of you. Kofi's heart swelled, but then Aaron vanished. A trick, the voice whispered. Kofi's resolve hardened. He would not fall for illusions. He kept walking. The maze grew darker. Shadows moved. Kofi's heart pounded. He drew his dagger. A figure lunged at him. Kofi fought back, but the figure was relentless. Just as Kofi thought he'd be overpowered, the figure disappeared. A mirage. Kofi breathed heavily. He continued on. The maze seemed endless. Kofi's canteen was empty. His throat parched. He stumbled, fell, got up, kept walking. And then, a glimmer of light. The exit. Kofi sprinted toward it. But a massive sandworm blocked his path, its jaws open wide. Kofi drew his dagger. He charged. The sandworm struck. Kofi dodged, struck back. The sandworm recoiled. Kofi sprinted past it and emerged from the maze. The guardian awaited him. Well done, Kofi, he said. You have passed the test. But Kofi's journey was far from over. A new challenge awaited. The guardian led Kofi to a hidden chamber. Your final reward, he said. Kofi's eyes widened. A treasure trove, gold, jewels, and ancient artifacts. But a figure emerged from the shadows. Congratulations, Kofi, she said. Kofi's heart skipped a beat. Aaron, he asked. Aaron smiled. I'm proud of you, she said. Kofi's confusion cleared. Your test, he realized. Aaron nodded. To ensure you're worthy, she explained. Kofi's determination hardened. I won't fail, he vowed. Aaron's eyes sparkled. I know, she said. The guardian stepped forward. Your journey's not over, he warned. A new challenge awaits, he said. Kofi steeled himself. I'm ready, he said. The guardian nodded. Then let us begin. With that, the chamber began to shake. The ground trembled. The final test, the guardian shouted. Suddenly, the walls slid open, revealing a massive underground lake. A boat awaits, the guardian said. Cross the lake, he instructed, and claim your reward. Kofi nodded. He boarded the boat and began to row. The lake was treacherous. Waves crashed against the boat. Kofi's muscles ached, but he persisted. Finally, he reached the middle of the lake. A figure stood on the water. Welcome, Kofi, it said. Kofi's heart pounded. Who are you? He asked. The figure smiled. I am the spirit of the lake, it replied. Your final test, it said. Answer my riddle, it instructed, and claim your reward. Kofi, I steeled himself. I'm ready, he said. The spirit smiled. Here is the riddle, it said. What can be broken, but never held? Kofi thought deeply, and then he smiled. The answer is a promise, he said. The spirit nodded. Correct, it said. Well done, Kofi. With that, the lake began to calm. The waves subsided, and Kofi returned to shore, where Aaron and the guardian awaited. Congratulations, Aaron said. You passed the test, the guardian added. Kofi smiled. I did it, he said. But a new challenge awaited. The guardian stepped forward. Well done, Kofi, he said. You have proven yourself worthy. Aaron smiled. I knew you could do it, she said. Kofi's heart swelled. But then, a dark figure emerged from the shadows. Not so fast, it growled. Kofi's eyes narrowed. Who are you? He demanded. The figure sneered. I am the Dark One, it said. Ruler of the underworld. Kofi steeled himself. I won't back down, he vowed. The Dark One snarled. We'll see about that, it said. And with that, the battle began. Kofi fought with all his might, but the Dark One was relentless. Just when Kofi thought he'd be overpowered, Aaron intervened, her magic swirling. The Dark One stumbled. Kofi seized the opportunity, struck the final blow. The Dark One dissipated, and peace returned. The Guardian nodded. "Well done, Kofi," he said. Aaron smiled. "You saved us," she said. Kofi smiled. "It's over," he said. The Dark One's defeat brought peace to the land. The temple, once shrouded in darkness, now shone with renewed light. Kofi, Aaron, and the Guardian stood victorious, their bond stronger than ever. Aaron approached Kofi, her eyes shining with pride. "Kofi, you've grown so much," she said, her voice filled with emotion. Kofi smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over him. "I couldn't have done it without you," he replied, grateful for her unwavering support. The Guardian nodded, his expression stern but proud. "You've proven yourself worthy, Kofi," he said, "a true hero." As they stood there, basking in the glow of their triumph, Kofi realized that his journey had changed him. He'd faced his fears, overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges, and discovered a strength within himself he never knew existed. The temple began to heal, its ancient magic stirring once more. The balance between light and darkness was restored, and the land began to flourish. Kofi's journey had ended, but a new one was about to begin. Kofi reflected on his journey, marveling at the transformation he'd undergone. He'd faced his fears, learned to trust himself and others, and discovered the value of friendship and loyalty. Aaron and the Guardian had helped him, taught him, and guided him every step of the way. Kofi realized that he wasn't alone, that there were people who cared for him and believed in him. As he looked back on his journey, Kofi saw a boy who'd become a man. He saw the struggles, the triumphs, and the lessons learned. He saw the growth, the transformation, and the newfound understanding. Kofi's understanding of the world deepened. He saw that life was precious, that every moment counted, and that courage and friendship mattered most. He realized that the journey had changed him, that he'd emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Kofi looked back on his journey, remembering the trials and tribulations he'd faced. He remembered the fear, the doubt, and the uncertainty. But he also remembered the triumphs, the moments of joy and wonder. He remembered the people he'd met, the friends he'd made, and the lessons he'd learned. As he reflected on his journey, Kofi saw that every step, every decision, and every action had led him to this moment. He saw that the journey had been worth it, that the struggles had been necessary. Kofi realized that he'd found his path, that he'd discovered his purpose. He knew that he'd continue to face challenges, but he was ready. He was ready to face whatever came next. Kofi stood tall, his heart full of hope and anticipation. The sun rose over the temple, casting a golden glow over the landscape. Aaron smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "I'll be here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The Guardian nodded, his expression stern but proud. "Your journey continues, Kofi," he said. Kofi walked forward into the light, ready to face whatever came next. He knew that the journey would be long, that there would be challenges and obstacles, but he was ready. He was ready to face the future, to face himself. And so Kofi's journey continued, a new beginning unfolding before him like a blank page.